replace all the jobs, accountants, lawyers, call center jobs, and so on, which is kind of scary. So, what drives you to still be optimistic about it?
I think, as Ryan has said as well, I think we will see new jobs coming through the floor. There's no question about that. But now that we get to education as well, we need to make sure we upskill people with 21st century skills. People need to adapt quickly. They need to deal with complex environments quickly. So it's not just foundational literacies. It's all these. We might be doing multiple jobs. It won't be the same thing, as you rightly say. Your daughter's school is not going to be the same thing anymore. So you need to be ready. So we've created this. I won't say monster, but this thing. We are on this train. It's not going to stop. We want improvement. We need to adapt. So that's part of it. And we need to adapt quickly as a human species on multiple levels, government levels, business levels. And this could be fantastic technology if we adapt properly.
I think there's a real opportunity in the sense that I think as human beings in the industrial era we were trapped. We were trapped by an education system that asked us to replicate formula. We sat in classes, we learned a formula, we were taught how to replicate, and we were taught how to follow somebody else's rules. And then we went to a job, and essentially that's what we do. We go to a job to replicate somebody else's rules. We are robots, and we live in our lower brain, which is an automated brain. We are not conscious. Very few of us are conscious. We simply do work for somebody else to get money. And I think what's going to happen is that all of that work, all of that effort of replication is going to be removed from us. And suddenly we're going to be asked the question, what value can we add? Which actually forces us in what we call the upper brain, the conscious brain, to actually engage and start thinking and become present as human beings. Because our lives will not be about going to work to do some job. That won't exist. In fact, we will start having to economically give people, I believe, a universal salary, that you get a salary for being human. And actually, you don't have a job because robots doing most of it. So you actually get given money. What you have to do is to start thinking about meaning. Why the hell am I here? What am I going to do to add value? As opposed to trudging off to go and be a robot in somebody else's company. So I believe there is an opportunity for us to actually become more human. To start not being robotic in our thinking and actually become human. The challenge we have is whether we can adapt to that socially and politically, because there are lots of other forces that like keeping us working and like keeping us doing stuff. So I think there's going to be a massive shift politically, economically, based on what's going to happen here.
So I have a question about, for example, now the saying is like AI is in the state of like a 2-year-old kid, something like that. And when you compare that with the kids, it's like it's raising and all that stuff. So it's like, it's your kind of child. But on the other side, there was also like some parents who bring up somebody like Hitler. So are you afraid of bringing the next Hitler? Because what can happen? And what's the maximum like AI can reach? Like, is it like the same level like a 20-year-old, 100 or 200-year? What do you think about that?
So I think that goes back to the ethics. I mean, you can accelerate horrific outcomes, but you can accelerate wonderful outcomes. So I think the ability to scale impact, the acceleration of impact is enormous with what could happen as you start connecting things. Whereas historically, remember, we had to get individual societies to align. That took a long time and lots of reworking. Now it can be very quick. So I think we have to be, you're talking about wisdom. We are going to, as a species, have to start becoming wise. At the moment, if you think of it internationally, we are completely overwhelmed by our lower brain functioning, which is resulting in what I call very lower brain decision making, either or. So if you think of America, it's all decisioning about, there has to be about polarization. It's them versus us. So we're having the Muslims versus the Christians. We simplify races, black and white, economic, it's them and us. So we are very much working on them and us models. We have to, as a species, start moving into a far more conscious world, because otherwise we're going to accelerate. We've got our ecology is about to collapse. We've got technology accelerating, and we've got the economies going. If we cannot, as a species, raise, we will accelerate our own decimation. So we will be brilliant at accelerating our own decimation. or we can raise our consciousness to start thinking socially about systems, about each other, about sustainability, about our place on this planet, and artificial intelligence could potentially unlock us to do that. So it's going to, we are entering, I believe, a very critical phase in our human evolution, and whether we're going to make it or not is going to be how wisely we take this next journey.
Wow.
It's big, it's huge.
Do we have more questions from the audience? Yeah.
So, I don't know if it's contextual. I was listening to something where someone mentioned that all the developers and coders that we're training in coding academies across the world are going to be the equivalent of the typing classes that our sort of previous generations and our generations took, where typing is a skill that is useful, but it's becoming less useful as we change the way we interact with technology, and that coding and developing, or whatever you want to call it, but that workforce that we are generating as a solution to education is going to be left thinking at that low level, and that perhaps we should be training people to think at the higher level. That's what really, if you could comment on that. Or
Yeah, certainly correct. I like Brian's point of view. The typists, right? It's a bit late. So, yeah, I mean, as he was saying, it's going to require you to change your thinking about how your job functions. Like jobs shouldn't really function. You don't want to be an accountant. You do, but most don't, right? And so, what do you given time and not, no longer being necessary, it no longer being necessary for you to provide for yourself because you are provided for, right? You don't want to be a typist, I imagine, and similarly, you wouldn't want to be a coder, right? So what do you do? Right? That's kind of it. It's not depressing. It's the opposite.
Yeah, I'm not sure I agree with that. I'm not sure exactly what you mean. So, in the case of typing, like outside of typing, you're just strengthening your fingers. So I'm not sure like what else typing is good for intrinsically outside of the act of typing. But like a painter might be automated away by better painting tools. But the act of painting itself is intrinsically quite satisfying. Maybe people really enjoy typing just to be feeling the keys, but I think like there's something about painting that's intrinsically rewarding, and similarly coding. And I think in the case of coding, you're really learning how to structure reasoning and logic, and then put that into a series of instructions that a computer can carry out. But I think like the act of coding itself is intrinsically rewarding, and the kinds of thought patterns and reasoning structures that you'll learn when you learn how to write code are applicable to other things. The question of whether that'll be completely automated away, I think, is a much deeper one. Like this. I also agree with a lot of what you were saying. In the case of minimal basic income, I think one of the big concerns that people put forward is that people derive a lot of meaning from their work, and so if you give them a free income every month and they don't have to work anymore, what are they going to do? Well, I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure how much meaning all these accountants are deriving out of accounting, or a lot of what people are doing. I think people just like to keep themselves busy. And I don't think there's anything wrong with doing things just for their own reward, like coding to challenge yourself. I know some weirdos who like just do programming challenges. Like how can you build this specific solution to a problem? And there's something like just intrinsically rewarding about that.
Yeah, I can just comment. I think it's a both and on all of it. I do believe that the granularity of the coding will actually be done for you through technology. But what you're referring to is the creative side of it, which is actually to synthesize, is to see possibilities and be able to create new thinking and new ideas. And I believe that skill will be very human still. The actual execution of what you're thinking is, you may, like with PowerPoint, you might have these tools that make it very easy to create your, what you're seeing on the slide. You may well have tools that will very quickly create the code that you're needing to execute your thinking. But I believe that humanity is going to be a lot more about the creative, to thinking out of the box, coming up with new ideas, seeing patterns that are not currently seen, and bring those together. So that will be your skill. But the actual granular execution may be less so. But I believe that the creative, cognitive patterning that you'll need will definitely be something that will be valuable to you.
Yeah, so I think it's an interesting sort of analogy. I disagree with it to some extent, but I think the distinction between coding as a sort of simple tool and actually developing something as a way of thinking is where that sort of analogy falls apart quite quickly. But I think it raises an interesting point.
Do we have more questions?
I have a question around, you mentioned the medical industry being one of the industries that could be impacted by AI. Now, at what point surely it will be a phased approach to replacing what people are doing with machines. So a machine can read you, test your blood and say you need X amount of medication. What does it do then? It might be able to administer it. At what point do you not need a human to be loading those things up? Can the machine tell, I'm not administering the right fluid or medication at this point? So it's interesting to understand the risks around. They tell everyone don't come to work tomorrow, machines not taking over. But it's like, phase it out slowly.
I don't think it's going to be a dichotomy, it's a transition, and I think even if you look at what IBM, what they're trying to say is how do we enhance, what do we all say, trying to say that as well, how do we complement the human being? And right now, one of the companies that I have is Benedict AI, and there the focus is an intelligent virtual assistant for manufacturing users, and it's all about making their time more productive. How can we make you more productive? So it's like a Siri assistant, but for manufacturing. And it's about safety. If there's any problems, it can react and try to capture and help you in that scenario. So we're going to see a lot of that. In the healthcare industry, I think doctors are not going to go away. It's going to just shift some of the things that they were doing. They will be enhanced by these kind of AI machines that does do diagnostics and maybe make recommendations and help you. But it's still humans dealing with humans, and I think this is not going to go away. So I think empathy is going to be important. You want to feel, there's a human in the picture around this. Say machines can't solve you, you're going to die or something. Now suddenly you need the right people to help support whatever. So I think it's going to be a symbiosis. It's going to be enhancing. You'll see a lot of that going forward, and there will be a lot of new jobs created around that.
I actually really wanted to add to that because I have a daughter that's been through a medical. She had a heart operation at 8 months, so I've been through the medical journey, and I realized how bad our doctors are. We've got some terrible doctors in this country, and we've got some outstanding doctors. They're just very difficult to work out until you've experienced the negativity of a poor decision. And they've got a reason not to allow you to use AI because they've got vested interest. They've had years and years of investment. They don't want this. So the medical council will prevent this happening simply because there is a vested interest because they can have a huge premium at the moment attached to their diagnostic skills, which are very dodgy. Most of them don't go to proper conferences. They're not keeping up to date. So what I believe is going to be starting to happen is that it's going to accelerate, and in fact the barrier is not going to be AI's accuracy. I think it's going to be the legal prevention to try and say, well, whose liability is it when AI? Well, at the moment, it's very hard to nail a doctor because actually they can fudge it, and so actually there's more liability currently in human engagement. I hope very quickly that AI dominates the medical environment because it can learn far quicker and it can get a lot more accurate. And then actually I'd like a doctor to rather focus on my emotional and spiritual health, right. To focus on the empathy that I need, the trauma that I'm dealing with. That journey is something that very few doctors are skilled at. and where a huge amount of healing needs to happen. And I actually believe they can add a lot more value in that space. And actually the accuracy of the diagnostics can be done through artificial intelligence way better than they can. And I think the sooner we get there, I think the better.
Agreed.
Yeah, I'll just say there's a real shortage of doctors too. So you can have the example that arose earlier on medical diagnosis. You can take many thousands of examples of images of skin cancer and build an algorithm that can detect skin cancer in new images better than a doctor can. And that's really easy to scale to North African countries where there are no doctors. And so that also then frees up doctors to do more of the stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah, sure. I mean, practically, have you ever tried to migrate a legacy system? The banks make a lot of money, and they're still on their existing original system. There's a huge amount of technical debt that exists in industry. It'll take you 12 months to sign a sales agreement with a bank, right? It's going to be incremental because there's this massive amount of technical debt in the industry to move to, in order to migrate that, that's going to take time.
Last question? Cool.
So I've got a two-part question. The first one
just
is...
one and say.
1A, B.
So 1A is on safety. So say, for example, you have a self-driving cars. You can kind of cherry pick and construct like examples that fool that you're learning out of, So how do we make sure that the algorithm, how do we know that if I have like an algorithm that's running and there are thousands of cars around the road, that it's going to be safe, and that there's not someone that can come up and try construct algorithms that they know construct examples that fool what my algorithm is trained on. And the second question is accountability. So say, for example, I'm a bank and there's some legislation on, well, you can use gender as a variable for giving someone credit, but it can't be the determining variable. So you can't discriminate against gender. A lot of the really high-tech, state of the art is a lot of it is very black boxy, so it's very difficult to say how the variable is actually used to give you a 0 or a 1 in the end. So how do we kind of say, well, how do we kind of provide accountability for what our algorithms are actually saying?
Okay, I'll take the first one and pass the second one down the line. Right. So the first one's quite interesting, I guess. Let's look at instead of self-driving cars, because they're still relatively new, let's look at connecting a car to the internet, right? Some companies are good at it, right? So you cannot hack into that car. They've thought through the idea that someone is going to try and hack into the car and do something malicious, right? And so you can't. In terms of getting to that state, not too difficult. You just kind of fence off the area quite easily, right? Some companies aren't good at that, and so you can hack into that car and you can turn it off, right? They didn't think that through, and that's going to happen in this development of algorithm as well, right? If they're good, it's not too difficult a thing if they've accounted for those scenarios, right? If you see something that you've never seen before as an algorithm, you slow down and stop, right? There's your case, right? But if you're not in a good team, or the company that put together that self-driving car didn't account for everything else that they haven't seen, it doesn't end well, right?
Thank you very much. Do you want to add something?
Yeah, just I think what is really interesting, and we kind of responded to the second question a bit earlier, is that those algorithms, those technology will enhance humans in a sense of maybe a machine won't ever be able to have a moral or make sure that the algorithm works 100% of cases. But if you have a human behind that knows how the structure, how everything works on the back end, then you can improve both parties at the same time, the machine and the human, that will have more possibility.
Cool. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for.
Thank you.
We have a bar there, so feel free to have your drink and more if you want. And thanks again, everyone, for being here tonight. And maybe another one soon. Thank you.